Thank you, Daniel. Brandon came up to me before the lesson and said, hey, I'm going to read Ephesians 1, 3 through 10 for the Lord's Supper. Do you think it's going to be too redundant? I said, brother, you cannot read that verse enough. For I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. I hope we realize what we just sang. You know, there's a lot of uncertainties that take place in this world. There are days that are just downright hard. And let's face it, I don't think we should just keep telling ourselves that everything's just fine. Have you ever felt like you've had to just give that response when somebody says, how are you? I'm fine. And probably there have been days that you have been asked that and you have said, I'm fine, and you're lying. We've all probably been there because there are days that are just hard. But I'm convinced of a couple things. I don't care how hard the day is, when we can think about that line of that song that we just sang. For I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. I'm yours. That pretty much can make just about any day a little better. There was a little boy by the name of Tom. Tom was a very crafty young man. And at one point, he had set aside one summer to build a little boat. He poured all of his heart and time into this boat over the summer, and he lived out west, and there wasn't a lot of water out west that he could float his boat down a stream when time had come. But he spent a lot of time on this boat, and he got it just right, and finally the first rain came. Little Tom was so excited to take his boat down to the local creek bed that had recently been dried up because there was water flowing in it now. He tied a string to it and put the boat in the water for the first time, and he was so excited to watch it float. He pushed the boat out a little further, and the boat kind of caught the current, and he held the string as he walked down beside the river with his boat on a string, and he was so proud of himself. You can see his smile in your mind right now as this young man built this boat and is allowing it to flow down the stream on a string. He got to a point and the current kind of picked up a little bit, and the boat was really tugging at the string, and before long, unfortunately, the string broke. And Tom had no choice but to watch his boat race down the stream. He ran after it. He tried several times to stop it with a twig or with a stick that he could find, but before long, it was out of his reach, and it was long gone. Poor little Tom hung his head, walked back home. After that whole summer's worth of work, he lost his boat in a few short minutes. As he got home, his mom and dad asked, where's your boat, Tom? And Tom, in his lower voice, said, I lost it. I'll probably never see it again. I should have never built that stupid boat in the first place. Went to his room and slammed the door. But there's one thing about little boys and dogs. Little boys and dogs have short memories. Time passed, and it was time for Tom to start back to school, and one week turned to another week, and the leaves had started changing, and one day Tom was walking to school and walked by a pawn shop. And what did Tom see in the window but his little boat? And he was so excited as he ran into the store owner and said, hey, that's my boat in the window. And the store owner said, sorry, young man, somebody brought that boat in, and I bought that boat from that person, and if you'd like that boat, you'd have to buy it. And he says, but sir, I don't have a lot of money. And the store owner looked at the young man and said, it's going to be $1. So the young man, Tom, ran back home and emptied his piggy bank, and he looked underneath the couch cushions and finally came up with $1, and he ran back to the store, put it up on the desk and said, mister, I want to buy my boat back. The store owner went and grabbed his boat and handed it to Tom, and he hugged that boat. He was so excited, more excited than the day he made it. more excited than the day he put it in the river for the first time. And he looked at the boat and said this, "You're twice mine. First I made you, then I bought you." What an illustration for us when we think about the word redeemed. There's not a lot of things that I want to be part of or I want to be owned by. But I guess if I could be honest with you this morning, there is one thing that I want to be bought with. And there's one person I want to be owned by. And that's my God. I want to be His. Because just as little Tom looked at that boat and hugged that boat and said, "You're twice mine. First I made you, then I bought you." Our God, our Father in heaven, can look at each of us and say the same about us. First I made you, and then I bought you. If you were to put a centralized theme over the book of the Bible, it could be redemption. It could be an idea that from the beginning of time, when sin entered the picture and there became a separation between God and man, God desired to redeem people back into His own possession. It is a theme throughout the entire Old Testament. Over and over and over, concepts of redemption being put forth so God can be back in a right relationship with His people. In fact, if you were to look at this word, redemption, redemption literally means to be bought back or to be released on the payment of a ransom. To have something that was lost but now is found, something that has been transferred back to its rightful owner, just as little Tom thought that boat was lost but was bought back into his possession. We have an interesting idea that takes place in the Bible, specifically with one story. And if you're taking notes in your notebook, I'd like you to do this. I'd like you to turn it landscape. Right, I think it's portrait and landscape. So turn your notebook landscape, and I want you to draw a line right down the middle of the page. So you have two columns in your notebook. Because what I want to show you is something that takes place in the Old Testament that we see mimicked in the New Testament. Something that takes place as a temporary fix in the Old Testament that is permanently fixed in the New Testament. Because one of the main concepts when you think about redemption is this idea to be redeemed by the blood of a lamb. In your first column, I want you to go ahead and go to that next slide, Kenny. I want you to write this in that first column, redeemed by the blood of the lamb. And I want you to make sure you do something. If you're like me, sometimes when I'm writing or I'm taking notes, my uppercase and my lowercase gets mixed up. But I want to make sure that it doesn't matter if your uppercase or lowercase gets mixed up, but when you write the word lamb in that first column, it's a lowercase l. Because in the Old Testament, I want you to see something that takes place, maybe a familiar story that we all know, that takes place that really illustrates for us this idea of being redeemed by the blood of the lamb or being bought back by the blood, because the blood is the ransom that was paid. The blood, like we talked about last week in the idea of propitiation, propitiation was the appeasement of the wrath of God, and it was the sacrifices that took the place of man. But when you think of redemption, it's this idea that it has to be bought back. It has to be purchased back. And like the sacrifices in the propitiation story, they were the replacement or the substitute. But when it comes to redemption, the blood of the lamb is the payment. It's the process that happens. And let's take us on a journey. God loses the children of Israel. Whether they've moved away from Him or they begin worshiping idols, there is something constantly that God has to provide for them that they are to be bought back with. Moses enters the picture. God goes to Moses and says, Moses, I need you to go into Egypt. And I need you to go and retrieve my people back to me. Because my people are now enslaved. They are owned by somebody who is not their rightful owner. Pharaoh owns them. He's mistreating them. And I need you to go get them back. I need you to be that person for me. If you look at this idea, if you go back up maybe one slide, I'll kind of direct you to go through it there, Kenny. The children of Israel are first introduced as God's people. Throughout the entire Old Testament, they're his chosen people. But Pharaoh takes captive of them. Pharaoh treats them wrong. Pharaoh believes they belong to him. And remember what Moses does? With the guidance of God, if we start looking at the book of Exodus, starting in chapter 6, look at what the text says. Exodus chapter 6. Look at verse 5. It says, "Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will bring you out of under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment." And look at verse 7. "And I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians." The children of Israel found themselves in a predicament. They found themselves in a predicament, Kenny, go ahead into the next one, that they were being taken captive by Pharaoh, by the Egyptians. They found themselves not under the rightful ownership of who created them. And it was a situation that it was not good for them. So he goes to Moses and he says this, "Pharaoh, let my people go." Now understand that statement, and that's a statement we've heard a lot, right? We could have all probably completed that sentence. I could have said, "let my," and you all would have said, "people go." We've heard that before. I remember watching the old Ten Commandment movie and the depiction of the plagues. Let my people go, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened and did not let God's people go. Notice the possession that takes place over and over and over again when it comes to the plagues. It's never Pharaoh's people. Those people are always rightfully whose? God's people. But they've been taken captive. They've been separated from God. Pharaoh, let my people go. And we have the course of the plagues. And one plague after another, the Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not let the people go until a lamb was introduced. See, there's an interesting thing that takes place, and I want to draw a connection this morning. Sometimes I think we read the Bible wrong. Sometimes I think we read the Bible as 66 different books, when in fact we need to read the Bible as one book. One book that has a story of redemption, a story that shows that God wanted his people back. And when that lowercase lamb was introduced, we're introduced in Exodus chapter 12 to the final plague, the Passover. And we all know how the story goes in Exodus chapter 12, because it says what? Go. And I want you to take a lamb. Chapter 12 and verse 3, it says, "Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of the month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbors shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each can afford. You shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. A lamb is introduced because we all know what's going to happen. For God promised a Passover. And God said, I want you to take the blood of the lamb and I want you to do what with it? I want you to spread it on the doorposts of the house. For if you do not take the blood of that lamb and spread it on the doorposts of the lamb, the firstborn in every home shall surely die. I'll never forget watching that movie. And this depiction of this spirit hovering over this community and going in between the houses. And you hear screams from homes as their firstborns are dying because the spirit is passing over the homes with the lamb, with that blood. But not the ones that chose to do without it. A lamb is introduced, and we all know what happened based on the Passover. Pharaoh went back to him and said, fine, get out. Please leave. Look at Exodus chapter 12 and verse 31. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel, and serve the Lord as you have said. Go. Go be reunited with your God. Go serve your God. They were redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. We see this concept of redemption by the blood of the Lamb continually throughout the Old Testament sacrifices. The blood had to be shed. The blood had to be poured out to restore a right relationship with God and his people. When you look at this first column, they were redeemed by the blood of a lamb. The children of Israel were separate. They needed to be bought back, and a lamb was provided. Now, of course, we don't live under that law today. We don't function under that idea anymore. But the concept of redemption reigns true as the foundation of our faith today. Because just as they were redeemed by the blood of a lamb, the next column should read, we are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Like I did before and told you with the first column of the lowercase l, make sure that you do an uppercase L for this lamb. Because it is the lamb that had to be slain eternally. And this is a concept that if you do not understand these two columns, you cannot understand the book of Hebrews. It's going to be very hard for you to understand portions of Romans. Because what the Romans write, what Paul does and what the Hebrews writer does in this concept is to show this. Children of Israel, you know the traditions of your fathers. You knew what they did. You knew the sacrifices that had to be made. But now I want to tell you that there are children of God. Children of God that say this: we need redemption. We need redemption just like the children of Israel needed. Just like they were. We are God's treasured possessions. He created us. We can read verse after verse after verse of God calling us his people. For I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. But we've also been taken captive. Pharaoh hasn't come in and made us slaves, but rather we've been slaves of sin. We've been taken captive by sin. And how many times do you see biblical writers talk about the idea of being ruled by sin? And there's a whole contrast that really begins in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33 of what we're going to be ruled by. Are we going to allow God and Christ to rule our hearts and seek first His kingdom? Romans chapter 6 makes a great point about the concept of dying to the sin in our lives so it doesn't rule us. Taking captive by sin, that's when it's ruling our lives. And I think as we sit here this morning, each of us can think personally in our own minds and reflect how sin has taken us captive. How it's ruled our thoughts, our actions. How sometimes when sin has taken us captive, we do things, and after we do them, we say things like this: I can't believe I did that. I was caught up in the moment. I don't know what came over me. Because sin was rule of our lives. In John chapter 8 and verse 34, Christ says this: truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is enslaved to sin. Well, Dustin, I sin. Does that mean I'm enslaved to it? There's a difference in practicing sin and struggling with it. There's a difference in willingly participating in sin and knowing it's wrong and still allowing it to rule your decisions and to destroy your relationships. Than to say, I know that's a problem. And I'm going to struggle with it. So, Jed, I need your help. I need to sit down with you and I need you to help me be accountable. Because I don't want to practice that sin anymore. I want to struggle with it. I want it to be rid of my life. But unfortunately, sin has taken us captive. It's ruled us. It's ruling who we are and how we talk. Colossians chapter 1, verses 13 and 14 says this: He has delivered us from the domain of darkness. He has delivered us from being ruled by sin. He paid that ransom. He was like the boy who ran home and got that dollar and brought it back and said, I'm paying for this because it's worth it. He has transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption and the forgiveness of sins. I think if we could be honest with ourselves this morning, there may be some of us who are still being taken captive by sin. You're good people. We're good people. But maybe the wrong thing owns us. Maybe this morning the wrong thing owns me. And I'm going to tell you, if it's not God who owns you, it's the wrong thing. We're His. For I have redeemed you. For I have called you by name. We want to be owned by a lot of things. We want to be owned by our allegiance to our country. We want to be owned by a political party. You cannot not laugh when you hear that. Some of you couldn't hear it and they're going, what is he talking about? Right? We're all owned by somebody. And if it's... you just can't just ignore that. It's perfect. Are you owned this morning by God? Have you allowed the Lamb that has been introduced and His blood to pay your ransom? See, here's the crazy part about all of this. When I read passages like Ephesians chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 12, 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, there is a strong point that is made. And here's the point. Sin has taken you captive. Sin and your iniquities, according to Isaiah 49, have separated you from God. And without the blood of Christ, you're separate. Like the little boat had flowed down the stream and is not with the Creator anymore. Like the little boat that is gone. And we turn around and we walk back home with our head down. And God said, okay, I've got you. I've got you. Because you can't afford it. You can't afford what you need to pay for your sin. And we're not going to do the whole Day of Atonement anymore. The blood of bulls and goats is not going to cut it anymore. So Hebrews chapter 10 says, I'll prepare a body. I'll prepare my son. And my son's going to come and live a perfect life. Just like that lamb that had to be slaughtered at Passover was without spot and without blemish. Sometimes we think about Christ's life and we say, wow, that's great that he didn't have a sin. No, he had to have no sin. Because when the day came and that blood was shed, the lamb was introduced. The lamb was introduced. Not only was he introduced in Matthew chapter 1, when we read about, and he was born of a virgin, but he was introduced way back in Isaiah 53 and other prophecies that said he was coming. And it's interesting. It is no accident. It is no coincidence that in Isaiah 53 he says this, and like a lamb, he was led to the slaughter. There are a lot of neat things that people have done for me over my life. Probably some things that I could never properly tell them thankful for. But none like the fact that my God gave his son to redeem me with his blood. I want us to just think about that for just a minute, because as I was working through this lesson this week, here's what kept happening. I kept saying in my mind this. Yeah, I get it. And that's great. But every time that came across my mind, here was the second thought. Do I? Because I think here's where the rubber hits the road. Jason, you know I'd do just about anything for you, right? So Jason and I are out hunting one day. A guy walks up and tries to shoot him. And I jump in the place of the bullet. What relationship would Jason and I have if that were to happen? How would you respond to that? Would there be a birthday that you ever missed? A meal that you never invited him to? Would there be a day that I saw him at church and not said hello to him or he to me? Our relationship would become so glued together because of what happened. And that's where my mind went when I can understand what Christ did through his blood. I'll be honest, I think I've taken it for granted far too long. I think being somebody who has heard this all of my life, and redemption, and Jesus is the Redeemer, and he's redeemed me by his blood. I don't think I've fully comprehended how it should make me live my life. Forever indebted to the blood that was shed on that cross. Listen to me. It should change us. It should transform us. It should cause us to go, that's what Jesus did for me. Because without him, I'm taken captive by somebody else. Without him, I do not belong to God. Without that sacrifice, without that blood, without that crucifixion, I am lost. I have no home in heaven. And to be honest, without that blood, I'm not sure what there is to live for. Now, we find ourselves in probably 2 or 3 different categories this morning. And here's the reality of it. There's 2 or 3 different categories represented here this morning. There are some that have been covered by that blood. Wednesday, we watched our brother, our new brother, accept that blood of Christ. Repent of his sins and be baptized for the forgiveness of his sins. And my brother Stephen Dossie is now going to go to heaven with me. Because that blood has covered him. He had been redeemed by that blood. And now he can sing that song that we just sang. For I have redeemed you. That's one category. The other category of people are this people. You haven't been. And right now you are being taken captive by sin. It is ruling your life, and it's very easy for us this morning to sit here and look the part. We can get dressed and we can come here and we can sing the songs and we can look like we're doing good, but we're sleeping with the neighbor. We're watching pornography. We're gossiping, we're slandering, and we're living a life taken captive by the sin in our life. But I don't want people to know. I want people to think I'm looking good. So I'm going to show up on Sunday and I'm going to look good, and if Jed wants me to read Scripture, I'm going to read Scripture. I'm going to have my Bible in tow. But as soon as I get home, that Bible gets set somewhere, and I go back to the life I really want to live, and that's being taken captive by sin. I know it's not a pleasant thought for us to think about, but there are some of us here this morning. And you all know how much I love you. So I have to tell you this. You got to let that blood redeem you. You got to die to that sin, guys. None of us in here are perfect. And just because we've been redeemed by it doesn't mean we're going to struggle with it. But my plea to you this morning is to allow that blood to cleanse you. God looks at you and says, I want to redeem you with the blood of my Son. It's your turn right now to take that blood and sprinkle it on the door. There's a third category of people in here too. And that's the category of people that are this way. You know somebody who's been taken captive by sin. And you love them. But maybe not enough to tell them about the blood of Christ yet. I can't imagine what it would have been like that Passover. To hear my neighbor crying out in pain as they lost their son because they didn't allow the blood to redeem them. There's going to be another day that comes when we're going to hear similar cries. And those clouds are going to roll back. And our Lord's going to reappear. And there's going to be cries that day. There's going to be cries that day because God said all the while, I have desired to redeem you with the blood of my Son, but you've chosen to live according to your own ways, to be taken captive by your sin, and you have not died to them. So my plea this morning is that each of us evaluate our own life. We get real with ourselves and say, what are those things that I need to die to? I am so thankful that my God looked at me and said, here's my son, and he's going to bleed for you so you can be with me in heaven one day. This is a sermon call to action for us to stand up and sing this song, realizing that through the blood of Christ, our chains are gone and we've been set free.